Welcome back to episode 22, and today my mom is going to talk about how to keep a good mothering perspective for the long term in the everyday tasks.
All right, well, let's jump right in. I heard a good illustration one time that talked about, it was from a fella that grew up on a farm, and he was talking about plowing, how to plow a field straight. And he says what you'd have to do is line up a fence post or a tree or something like that at the not far from your field, and then look for something farther away that lines up with that, and make sure as you're plowing you keep those two right together in your sight so that you don't kind of waver as you plow. And he was applying that to life. We need to be thinking about what we're doing now and how it pertains to our long-range goals. So we're going to talk about those things. All of us mothers, and sometimes at different times of the month, will struggle with things like, I need to have some peace and quiet, or I need to do what I want to do, or I can do it faster and better by myself. I don't need to get the kids involved. And or sometimes we're tempted to say, I need to get a job so we can get a better car and a better house and the things we need. Or I'm not a teacher, I'll let the professionals do that. So there's a lot of things that can come into our minds that aren't necessarily wise and the basis to make wise decisions. So we're going to talk about some short-term and long-term goals, and I want you to enjoy each stage of your baby's life and your child's life, but keep that backdrop of that they are going to live for eternity someplace, and they're going to be responsible adults someplace and in the future, and you want to make the most of your time with them when they're young. Psalm 16, 5-7. And it talks about a long-term view and a short-term view. And this is about our walk with the Lord. And it says, the Lord is the portion of my inheritance. Well, inheritance is something that you look forward to, but that's a long way off usually. That's the long-term view. And my cup. Well, if you're a coffee drinker or a tea drinker, you might look forward to that cup of tea or coffee each morning. And that's a daily thing. You shall uphold my lot. It goes on to say in a couple verses later, it says, I will bless the Lord who has given me wisdom. So whether it's for the short term or long term, you need to trust in the Lord for that wisdom. And so we're going to look at some short-term thoughts and attitudes and approaches that'll help you, hopefully, in the long term. Verse in Proverbs 22:6 says, train up, which means in Hebrew to narrow, initiate, or discipline, a child, and the child there is from the ages of infancy to adolescence. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. So that's something good. You have a big responsibility to train. And God made children very impressionable. And so we need to make the most of that and make sure that we are impressing them with wisdom and knowledge and truth, and not throwing them in with those that will impress them in the wrong way. Proverbs 13:20 says, he that walks with wise men shall be wise, but a companion of fools shall be destroyed. And no mother wants that. So it says, when it says a companion, the Hebrew there means part of a flock or to graze with. So lots of times the people that you spend the most time with are the ones that have the biggest impression on you. And then when it talks about fools, there are different kind of fools listed in Proverbs, but this fool is stupid or silly. And you know, there's a lot of silliness and stupidity among children, and if they all get together, they kind of rub off on each other. So we want to be wise, and we want to be the ones that are nurturing and training our children and nurturing their attitudes. Also, motivation and attitude is catching. Do you enjoy life? Do you have a positive attitude toward life because you are trusting the Lord with all your heart? That will help a long way with helping your children enjoy life with you and learning from you. And a love for learning is more important in the long run than filling in workbooks and textbooks. You know, I was a teacher before I was married, and I'm just telling you, textbooks and workbooks are not there just to make learning fun. Usually it's to make life easier for the teacher, where she can kind of give assignments and put test questions together easily. So you don't have to follow that approach when you're teaching your children. You can just make learning exciting and something that's they will just enjoy the process. When we were teaching our children to read, and Christy can remember that, I would tell them, you know, learning to read is not necessarily fun, but reading is a pleasure for life. And so to spawn that pleasure, besides teaching them to read, we would read them wonderful biographies and books and allegories. And so their desire to be readers and their continuing reading patterns as adults bears out that reading is really worth the effort, and you want to keep that excitement about books while you're teaching them. Teach them, take them on walks and hikes and marvel at God's creation. You want to plant those seeds about our great Creator and how He has designed things so wisely. And we just can marvel at the colors and the beauty and the grandeur. And so whether you're camping or backpacking or just going on a stroll in the park, be alert for ways that you can reinforce just the wonder of our great Creator God. Also, whenever possible, for young children especially, make learning fun. You know, it doesn't have to be tedious. You can enjoy it just as much as they can when you can feel creative and not feel like you have to follow a textbook. Or we had a big jar of change, and the kids enjoyed counting out coins, and that instead of just filling in a workbook page where they had little black and white pictures of coins. So just make hands-on as much as possible, but with the goal that you want them to be wise and able to do their math, do their reading, understand the world, understand history. And honey is sweet. Encourage them all along. They're a child at first. We were with my little granddaughter this week, and she's just getting where she's cooing and all, and we just are enjoying that so much. But if she was just not talking and just doing those kind of sounds, in a few years we'd be worried. Enjoy each blossoming of your child and their different ages and stages. Just delight in that, make the most of it, and encourage them. Lots of smiles, lots of praise and encouragement, and being a good example yourself. And so I'm going to talk about some practical areas where you need to keep, especially you need to keep the long-term view and wisdom of what for the future. One is toys. We talked about that before. Books, we touched on that briefly in one earlier session, but you know, there's a lot of books that have a lot of occult flavor in it, and movies and videos along that same line, and you do not want to give your children permission to pass over into the occult. You know, David in Psalms, he talks about he would not even take the names of the idols on his lips. And we don't want those thoughts and those things that are not true to be in our child's mind and open that door that should be shut. Also, music. When one of my boys was just going into his teen years and he was starting to be around kids at church, and some of them were listening to music that wasn't so good, and so I would go on the internet and find the lyrics and print them off, and we would talk about it together and say, is this something that is pleasing to God? Is it true? Is it right? Is it making someone go in the wrong direction? So you need to just think ahead about these things. Of course, we've talked about magazines before, and sometimes girls are a little bit more prone to be compare themselves with the models there. Videos and movies. We didn't take our children to any theater or movies until they were later in adolescence, and we did that for two reasons. Partly because there's so many advertising things of other movies that we did not want them to be exposed to, and partly because visuals are so impacting to children, and we wanted to be very wise along that line. So that's another thing. Activities. I remember early on in homeschooling, and we would get together with another homeschooling group, and sometimes the mothers would talk about how they're really trying to get their children into commercials and movies, and I felt sad about that, because that's not a very good environment for children to long to grow up into or be exposed to. And then video games. Video games can be violent and not helpful, and so think clearly about that. When we first had a computer and our children were in their older elementary age, we would there would be just little Pac-Man and some things like that, so we didn't expose them to any of the other things. But just think about that. That has a big impact on people. And think about how much exposure you want your children as they're growing to iPads and personal computers and phones. Make sure you have some protections on those, that because there's so many things that can come up on a screen that can be something that the children have a hard time erasing from their memories. So think short term. As you go through each stage, there's maybe things that other kids have that your child thinks that they need to have, but make your life so much fun at home and the things that you do as a family, that they won't feel like that they've been left out, but they'll enjoy the memories of life together and learning together.
All right, and thank you once again for watching this week. And we don't have a set topic for next week. It might be another sibling interview, but stay tuned for that, and we'll see you next time.
Okay, so long for now.
Bye.